He was just a wounded puppy, abandoned and bleeding. But when rescuers found him lying across a dying fawn, shielding her with his fragile body, everything changed. What he did next wasn't instinct. It was love, sacrifice, and a bond that defied nature itself. This story will stay with you forever. Before you scroll away, my heart honestly sank when I saw that 98% of people watch my videos but don't subscribe. If this video made you feel even a little something, please consider subscribing. It might be just one click for you, but it means the world to me. It started with a scream. Not a human scream. Not quite an animal one either. Just raw sound, twisted with panic, dragging across the cold morning air like something was tearing loose from the earth itself. That's what the hikers told us later. They were passing through a remote trail outside Blue Ridge, Georgia. It was early. Mist still curled around the trees, light barely cresting the canopy. They said they froze when they heard it. One of them wanted to turn back. The other started walking towards the sound. That's how they found them. A clearing. Low ground, scattered with pine needles and broken branches. The remnants of a fallen barbed wire fence, rusted and curling like a wound across the earth. And at the center of it all, a bleeding fawn, barely more than a few weeks old, legs tangled in the wire. And on top of her, literally on top of her, was a small dog. A mutt, they said. Maybe some Labrador, maybe some shepherd. Covered in mud, left hind leg twisted, one ear torn, bleeding from his side. But what they remembered most wasn't the wounds. It was his eyes. He didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't move. He just stared, unblinking, at the strangers approaching, as if daring them to come closer. That's when the hikers called us. I work with a small wildlife rescue and rural vet team. We don't get emergency calls like this often. But the man's voice on the other end was shaking. "I think he's protecting her," he said. When we arrived, I didn't believe it, not at first. He looked half dead himself. His ribs stuck out under fur matted with blood and brambles. One paw was swollen to twice its size. And yet, he stayed. Curled around the fawn's broken body, trembling with pain but not moving. Not yielding. The fawn was breathing, barely. Her eyes flickered open once, and then closed again. Her legs were bloodied, and one appeared fractured. But she was warm, because he'd kept her that way. I remember crouching, speaking softly. "Hey, buddy. It's okay. We're here now." He didn't snarl, didn't snap, just shifted his weight protectively. When I reached for the fawn, he made a low, keening noise, half growl, half cry. His muscles tensed, but he didn't bite. He was asking us, begging us, "Please don't take her." The vet tech with me whispered, "They didn't get caught here together." "No," I said slowly. "He found her." And then I noticed the trail. Blood smears, drag marks, clumps of fur, not just from the fawn, but from him. He'd found her tangled in the fence, and he'd tried to pull her out. His injuries weren't just incidental. He'd hurt himself, badly, trying to free her. That's when I broke. It wasn't just a moment. It was the stillness in his eyes, the way he pressed his muzzle into the curve of her neck, even as we lifted her gently onto a stretcher, the way his ears flicked at every rustle of plastic. He thought we were taking her away for good. "We can't leave him here," I said. "But he's feral," someone murmured. "He's not," I said. "He's hers." They let me take him. No collar, no chip, no name. I wrapped him in a torn emergency blanket and carried him to my truck. He didn't fight. He didn't resist. He just kept looking back, head twisting, until the stretcher carrying the fawn disappeared from view. I whispered to him, "She's okay. I promise. She's going to be okay." He didn't believe me, and I don't think I did either. That night, he didn't move. I laid a blanket down near the sliding glass door in my kitchen, and that's where he stayed, nose pressed to the bottom of the glass, eyes locked on the darkness beyond. He didn't touch his food. He didn't drink. He barely blinked. His breathing was shallow and his leg trembled every so often, but he refused to lay all the way down. I sat on the stairs and watched him until after midnight. I'd seen injured dogs before. Trauma cases, starvation, broken bones, broken spirits. But there was something different about this one. Something in the silence. He wasn't confused or afraid. He was waiting. At one point, I tried to speak. "You're safe now. She's safe." He didn't move. He didn't care about being safe. I called the wildlife center the next morning. They said the fawn, who they'd named Luna, had survived the night, but barely. She was heavily sedated. Her body was still in shock. And they were concerned about internal bleeding. She hadn't eaten, hadn't stood. "She's a fighter," the vet told me gently. "But I don't know." I looked over at the puppy by the door, his head still tilted slightly like he was listening. "She's not alone," I whispered. "He's still with her." At sunrise, I took him outside. The air was cold, the dew thick underfoot. He limped beside me down the gravel path behind my house. Not pulling, not sniffing, just walking. When we reached the end of the trail, he stopped, ears perked, tail stiff. I followed his gaze into the woods, and I realized something. He wasn't just remembering. He was grieving. The place where he'd found her, the place where he had bled for her. It lived in his body now, and no matter where he went, he would carry it with him. This puppy had done something no human would expect. He'd chosen to stay, even when it hurt, even when it meant nothing for him. He had stayed. By day 3, I was starting to wonder if Ranger, the name I'd started whispering to him, would ever let the world touch him again. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept, not really. Just collapsed in short, shivering bursts by the door, then jerked awake like he'd heard something calling from the woods. I sat with him through most of it. Caleb, my son, sat too, quiet and still, his sketchbook balanced on his knees. He never tried to touch the puppy, never said a word, just drew. And Ranger watched him, wary at first, then almost curious. Their grief ran parallel. One sketched his, the other carried it in silence. It was on that 4th night that something changed. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard it, a soft shuffle of paws. I opened one eye and saw him standing in the middle of the living room, his nose pointed toward the back window. Then, without warning, he let out a single, low, aching howl. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sharp, it was full of everything he hadn't said. And it shattered me. I got up, knelt beside him, and whispered, "I know, buddy. I miss her too." He looked at me, really looked, for the first time since I'd brought him home. His eyes were bottomless, haunted, asking if I could fix something I didn't even understand. I couldn't, but I could stay. The next morning I called the wildlife center again. Luna was still alive. Weak, but showing signs of stabilization. She'd started to respond to touch. Had taken a few sips of milk. "She's not giving up," the vet told me. "Whatever kept her alive out there, she's still holding on to it." I glanced at the puppy curled tightly in the corner of the kitchen, his back to me, but ears flicked toward the sound of my voice. "She's holding on," I whispered again. He didn't move, but I swore his breathing changed. That afternoon, something strange happened. I was cleaning one of Ranger's front paws, carefully trimming away dried blood and debris, when I noticed a different smear, a thick, dark stain that didn't match the wound. It wasn't his. It was older, crusted into his pads. Blood. Not from his own injuries. It must have come from Luna. I paused, heart pounding. You tried to get her out, didn't you? There had been drag marks, blood on the wire, tufts of fur in the thorns. He'd pulled her. He'd fought that fence, teeth and paws and everything he had, to free a creature that wasn't even his own species. I stared at him, and he just stared back, like he'd been waiting for someone to understand. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't instinct. It was devotion, and it had nearly killed him. That night, I sat on the floor near the door. I didn't talk. I didn't try to coax him with food or comfort. I just sat there. And after maybe an hour, Ranger slowly lifted his head and crawled, inch by inch, towards the blanket I'd laid down for him days earlier. He didn't curl into it. He just let his body touch the edge, like maybe he was testing what softness felt like. It was the first time he'd allowed himself rest, and I didn't dare move. The next day, Caleb offered him a cooked egg. Ranger sniffed it, then looked at Caleb, long and deep, before gently taking the piece from his hand. He didn't eat it right away. He placed it on the floor beside him, then lowered his head onto his paws and exhaled. Not a whine, not a sigh, just a sound like something inside him had shifted. Caleb looked up at me, unsure. Is that good? I nodded, tears prickling. That's hope, honey, that's what it looks like. By the weekend, Ranger had started following me from room to room. Quietly, no tail wagging, no puppy enthusiasm, just steady steps, soft as breath. He walked like someone who'd been scolded for making too much noise once, like he was trying not to take up space. I kept reminding him with every soft word, every open door, every gentle hand. You're allowed to be here now. He didn't trust it yet, but he wasn't running from it either. The vet cleared him for light walks. He's healing slowly but well, she said. No fractures, just deep muscle trauma. He's lucky. I glanced at the ragged scar along his left side. He wasn't lucky. He was determined. She smiled, eyes soft. You really believe he stayed for her? I didn't hesitate. Number, I believe he chose to. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any instinct. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Ranger stood on the back porch and let the breeze run through his fur. I watched from the kitchen window, hand over my heart. He wasn't pacing anymore. He wasn't shaking. He just stood there. Still. Tall. Steady. Like a sentinel waiting for word from the battlefield. And in that moment, I whispered to the dusk, "She's still fighting, Ranger. Just like you." His ears flicked once, then he sat. And stayed. The trail behind our house wasn't anything special. Just a narrow footpath flanked by pine and thorn brush, broken branches, and the occasional deer print in the soft dirt. But Ranger treated it like holy ground. I'd started walking him every morning, just short loops at first. He never pulled, never darted or barked like other puppies. He just walked beside me, head low, nose twitching, ears tuned to every rustle. And always, at the same place, he would stop. A sharp bend in the trail, where the woods grew quiet and the canopy thickened, where the air got cooler, where memory lived. That's where it happened. One morning, maybe a week after we found him, Ranger stopped at that bend again. But this time he didn't just pause. He pulled. Hard. "Ranger, no," I said gently. "Let's go home." But he didn't budge. He stood there, body tense, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. And then, with a sound like resolve caught in his throat, he pulled again. Not frantic, not wild, just determined. I sighed. Okay. And I followed. We wove through the trees, the ferns brushing against our legs, past fallen logs and mossy rocks. The deeper we went, the more I realized this wasn't random. He knew where he was going. Every twist, every step, like he'd memorized it. And then we reached it. The clearing. I knew it before he stopped. The twisted fence sat half-collapsed beneath a thicket of vines, rusted and streaked with something darker. Leaves carpeted the ground, but underneath I saw the drag marks, faint now, softened by rain and time. Ranger stepped forward slowly, his paws silent on the earth. Then he sat. Not like a dog visiting a familiar place, like someone visiting a grave. I stood behind him, stunned. It hit me all at once. The blood, the silence, the way his body had lain across Luna's in that tangle of thorns. This was the place he stayed. This was where he bled. And he remembered. I crouched down, my hand brushing the ground near the edge of the fence. A few short silver hairs clung to a jagged metal point. Luna's. I swallowed the tightness in my throat and whispered, "You saved her here." Ranger didn't look at me. He just stared ahead, as if waiting for something to stir in the trees. Something only he could feel. We stayed there a while, him and me, not speaking, not moving. And I realized I wasn't just looking at a wounded puppy. I was looking at a soul that had already walked through something it shouldn't have survived. A puppy who had chosen pain, who had chosen to stay. And now, he needed to remember it, just once more, before he could move forward. That night, back at the house, Ranger didn't curl up by the door like before. He walked past it, into the living room, sat beside Caleb. And when my son looked down at him, Ranger lifted one paw, just slightly, and placed it on Caleb's foot. A gesture so small it could have gone unnoticed, but Caleb froze. Then knelt down. And Ranger leaned in, pressing his nose to the boy's chest. I saw it in both of them. That fragile thing growing between two beings who didn't quite know how to ask for help, but knew how to be with someone who needed it. I called the wildlife center the next morning. Luna was alive. Still fragile, still wary, but her vitals were stable. She was eating, drinking, but there was something else. "She won't rest when we leave the enclosure," the vet said. "She panics when she's alone, keeps searching the corners, looking for something." My heart cracked. "She's not looking," I said softly. "She's remembering." There was a long pause on the line. "You think it's the dog?" she said finally. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That evening I sat beside Ranger near the fireplace, brushing out the last tangles in his coat. "You still see her, don't you?" I whispered. He didn't move, didn't blink. But I saw the answer in the flick of his tail and the stillness in his bones. He saw her, in dreams, in sounds, in silence, in memory. And I saw her too, through him. That night I had the dream again, trees whispering, a clearing bathed in moonlight, and Ranger, not as a puppy, but as something ancient and noble, standing between a world of thorns and something too delicate to walk it alone. When I woke, he was already at the window, watching, always watching. It was early morning when the wildlife center called again. Their voices were soft, uncertain. "Luna's regressing." I sat up straight. Ranger, asleep by my feet, stirred. "She's refusing food again, barely standing. She's alert, but it's like something turned off inside her." The woman hesitated, then added, "We know this isn't typical procedure, but would you consider bringing the dog to see her?" I didn't even have to think. "We'll be there within the hour." Ranger didn't jump into the car. He stepped in carefully, head low, like he understood. He hadn't seen her in nearly 2 weeks. But he knew. Every mile closer we got, the straighter he sat. No whining, no wagging, just stillness, like gravity was pulling him home. When we arrived, the staff led us quietly around the building to the outdoor pen. Luna was lying in a patch of grass, her eyes open but distant, her legs tucked tightly beneath her, her body too still. Ranger stopped when he saw her, then took one step forward, another, then paused. Luna lifted her head. And in that one quiet movement, the world cracked wide open. She let out the tiniest bleat, barely audible, barely real. Ranger responded with a sound I'll never forget. A low, trembling whine that turned into a single soft bark. Not loud, not playful, but knowing, calling. He lay down just outside the fence, eyes locked on hers. She blinked slowly, then stretched her neck forward, ears twitching. The staffer inside the pen held out a bottle again, like they had a dozen times before. And this time, Luna drank. I pressed my hand to my chest. There was no explanation, just connection. A bond forged in pain, in silence, in shared survival. They didn't speak the same language, but they understood each other in ways no one else could. For nearly an hour, Ranger didn't move, and Luna never looked away from him. She ate more. She stood. She even turned, weak as she was, to follow his gaze when he shifted slightly. When it was time to leave, Ranger resisted. His legs stiffened. His body stayed rooted like a tree. I knelt beside him. She's going to be okay now. He didn't look at me. He looked at her. Only after she gently lowered herself back into the grass, head resting peacefully, did he stand and follow me. Back home, something shifted. He didn't collapse like before, didn't curl up by the door. He walked calmly into the living room, lay on the rug beside Caleb's feet, and let out a long, slow breath. That night, he ate every bite of his dinner. And for the first time, when Caleb passed by him, Ranger didn't flinch. He let Caleb's hand rest on his back, even leaned into it. We started a new rhythm after that. Morning walks, brushing on the porch, quiet afternoons lying in the sun. Ranger didn't chase squirrels or chew toys like other puppies, but he watched everything, closely, like life was a story he was still learning to trust. Then, one day something happened that stopped me cold. I came out of the shower and heard light, skittering footsteps. Caleb was frozen in the hallway. "Mom," he whispered, eyes wide. Ranger was at his feet, tail swaying gently, ears relaxed. He just came to me. Caleb knelt. "Hey, buddy." And Ranger leaned forward, placing his chin on the boy's knee. I turned away so they wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. Because this wasn't just healing, this was trust. The call came that night. Luna stood on her own today. My breath caught. She's still shaky, but she's eating, walking, even responding when we enter the enclosure. We think she's going to make it. I looked at Ranger, lying quietly beside my chair. His ears twitched at the sound of my voice. "She's walking," I told him softly. He looked at me, then thumped his tail twice. The next morning, something new happened. Ranger brought me his leash. He had never done that before. "You want to go somewhere?" He wagged. I opened the door. He stepped out, no pulling, no pacing, just calm. We walked the same trail as before, past the old tree, around the bend, and this time when we reached the edge of the clearing, Ranger didn't stop. He looked once toward the woods, then kept walking. Not away from something, toward something. The center called 2 days later. "We'd like to try one last visit, before we start the final phase of Luna's rehabilitation." Final phase, complete separation. No human or domestic contact. She needed to readapt to the wild fully. But they weren't sure she was ready. "We think seeing him again might help." But I knew this visit wasn't just for her. It was for him, too. That night, Ranger lay by the window again. but not pacing, not watching, just waiting. We arrived in the early afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the trees like golden threads. They brought us to the same outdoor pen. Luna stood. On her own, still slender, still healing, but stronger. She saw him before we even turned the corner. Her ears perked. Ranger walked forward. No rushing, no barking, just presence. At the fence, he sat, then lay down. And Luna walked to him. 1, 2, 3 steps. She pressed her tiny muzzle against the mesh, and he leaned forward. Their noses touched. The entire center went silent. Because in that moment there was no wilderness, no pain, no fences, just 2 survivors who had kept each other alive. The sky was a pale blue the morning we got the final call. The wildlife team spoke softly, their voices carrying both pride and sadness. "She's ready." I closed my eyes for a moment. Ranger, lying in the sun by the porch, didn't move, but I swear he heard every word. "Her legs are strong. She's foraging. She responds to natural sounds the way we hoped. Tomorrow at dawn, we'll release her into the protected forest. There's a small herd nearby. We think she'll find them." I whispered a thank you, then hung up. I didn't tell Ranger right away, but he already knew. That night I sat beside him on the porch steps. The wind rustled the trees. The cicadas sang their dusk lullaby. "She's going home," I said quietly. His ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. He didn't need to. He felt it. We were invited to witness the release, with one condition: no contact, no words, no barriers broken. Wild meant wild. We arrived before sunrise. Mist blanketed the field. The transport crate sat near the edge of the trees, its door still closed. Ranger didn't bark, didn't fidget. He sat like stone, eyes on the gate. The latch opened with a soft click. The door creaked, and Luna stepped out. Careful, graceful, alive. She lifted her head to the wind, catching the scent of freedom. Her ears flicked. Her legs moved forward, cautious but confident. She passed through the gate, stepped onto the dewy grass, and walked. Not away, but into the world. And then, just before the forest swallowed her, she turned her head. One last time. Ranger stood, their eyes met across the field. No cries, no drama, just a breath that passed between them like a final promise. Then she vanished into the trees, and Ranger, he sat, still, watching, until the rustling stopped and the forest settled. Only then did he exhale. A long, slow breath, like he was finally setting something down. The handler looked over at me. "Most dogs would have gone wild trying to follow." I smiled, hand resting gently on Ranger's back. He's not most dogs. Back home, he didn't go to the door. He didn't check the windows. He lay in the center of the living room, calm, content, at peace. When Caleb came in from school, Ranger lifted his head, tail tapping the floor. Caleb dropped his bag and sat beside him. "She's gone, huh?" "She's free," I said. Ranger closed his eyes, and something inside him softened. We never adopted Ranger. He adopted us slowly, gently. He followed Caleb from room to room, rested at his feet during homework, walked beside him to the mailbox, nose to the wind. He never demanded. He offered, quiet, steady, whole. One afternoon, I found them lying together on the living room rug. Caleb was whispering something into Ranger's ear. Ranger didn't move, just blinked slowly, leaned in. Later, I asked Caleb what he said. "Just stuff," he murmured. "I don't really talk to anyone else about it." That night, lying in bed, I realized something. I hadn't known how heavy our house had become, how full of unspoken grief. The silence left by my husband's death had soaked into every corner. until a puppy arrived. A quiet, wounded soul who had already known pain, but chose to give warmth instead. The vet cleared Ranger for full activity. "He's healing beautifully," she said. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." I smiled. "He's the one doing the healing." Then came something unexpected. We were at a school event for kids coping with anxiety and trauma. I brought Ranger, unsure if he'd be overwhelmed. He wasn't. He moved among the children like he knew. One girl, too scared to speak, sat down beside him. Her hand touched his ear. She smiled for the first time all day. A boy with shaking hands placed one palm on Ranger's back. "You're not scary," he whispered. "You're like me." A teacher came over quietly. "Is he certified?" "For what?" "Therapy." I shook my head. "He's just ours." She smiled. "You should think about it. He's already doing the work." That night, Caleb said it first. "He's more than just a dog, isn't he?" I nodded. "He's exactly what we needed, even when we didn't know it." The next morning, a small package arrived, a custom tag. Caleb opened it gently and clipped it to Ranger's collar. It read, "Ranger, found in the forest, lives in our hearts." Weeks passed. We visited the wildlife center again, not for Luna, but for a small event celebrating the successful release of several animals. Families gathered under white tents, photos hung from strings, and there, at the end of one row, I saw it. A photo. Low angle, a battered fawn. A puppy lying across her side, eyes locked on the camera. Protective, immovable. "That's him," Caleb whispered. I nodded. The caption read, "The Guardian." Later, a staff member approached. "You brought Ranger, right?" I nodded. She knelt beside him. "We talk about him often. His story. It changed the way some of us view trauma. Not just in animals, in people too." Ranger pressed his nose to her knee. As the sun dipped behind the trees, we took one last walk. Back to the clearing. The twisted fence still lay rusted and forgotten. Grass had grown over the drag marks. The forest was quiet. Ranger stepped forward, sniffed the ground, and stopped. He stood there a long time, then turned and walked back to me. No looking back, no hesitation. That was the moment I knew. He had let go, not of her memory, not of what they'd shared, but of the weight. This puppy who once stayed behind in pain, who once bled for another life, now had a life of his own to live. And we were going to walk with him, every step of the way. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment. Ranger's journey is a reminder that healing doesn't always come loud or fast. Sometimes it arrives on 4 legs, in silence, and stays beside you, no matter what.